questions about it, right? So before I start, I would like to ask you, what is prudence for you? What do you think is prudence? Does anyone here know what is prudence aside of the father?
Think before you act.
Kind of good, yeah. I would say think before you act. So it's more about thinking, right? Like planning, right? So you're kind of there, like I would say 90%, but it's a little bit more than that, right? So I would say most of us, we know what's prudence because of what? Like movies, maybe media, books, like you watch a movie, right? Superheroes, like they kind of give you an idea of what is prudence, right? I would say there's a lot of examples, maybe more for the adults, right? We could say maybe there's this guy, he invested a bunch of money in Instagram, right, before it was bought, and then boom, became super rich. Oh, that guy, he was prudent, right? Or other examples would be, I don't know, even a player, have you watched any games? That guy preparing the game, right, before entering the game, that's like prudence, right? The truth is that, yes, that's kind of, but it's not correct. It's kind of a little lame, right? Of what it's, this image of prudence. It's not only about planning. It's like, it's the guy that's at the office all the time thinking. Well, prudence is not that exactly 100%. So, if you imagine prudence, like, let's personify prudence, right? As a person. Imagine it as a person, right? Let's perhaps pick another virtue. Let's imagine fortitude, right? How would you imagine fortitude? It would be like this warrior, right? Like the one that gets into a battle, big armor, jacked, like him, he seems to be, strong. So I want to like fortitude like that, right? And it's kind of accurate. But if you think about prudence, how would you imagine prudence? Person that thinks a lot. Maybe the grandma, the grandma of the parish, super kind, thinks a lot, always giving advice, bakes really, good cookies, but takes like 30 minutes to cross the street, right? That grandma, right? That's usually what people would think, but the truth is that it's not that. That's kind of lame. Like prudence, even though it has a part of it, it's not that. I don't have anything against the grandma, but that's not exactly what prudence is. So let's think about an example, right? How would be a good example of prudence? So I think that, we are hero men. There's thousands of examples, but perhaps examples that would relate a lot to us would be on wars, right? Imagine a commander, you have a big regime, you have 300 men, right? And you have to fight another, group of people, perhaps they are like 10 times you, right? And you have to hold your position, tiny hill, at all costs, right? You have just these 300 men, you have no odds to win, right? And you are running out of ammunition, right? It's like, whoa, that's a really challenging situation, right? So, well, that's actually true. That actually happened. I don't know how many of you know about the Civil War here in the US. I know little because I'm foreign, but I'm learning, through preparing the talk. There was this battle in where Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, right? It was, I think, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg. I don't know if you know about it. It was one of the most important battles in the Civil War. Actually, they won the battle, so I'm already telling you the conclusion, but they won the battle, and thanks to that battle, they won the war. So that's the situation he found that day, right? He was in that tiny hill, right? Only 300 men. And he had to decide, well, what do I do, right? Do I retreat? They are way more than me, right? So perhaps I should retreat, right? Do I don't know, just call for help? It's probably easier, right? So the answer is no, he didn't do that. He actually charged the bayonets, right? And they charged the enemy. And thanks to that, well, yeah, some people died, obviously. Thanks to that, because they charged them and they were not expecting that, then the rest of the Union, they were able to, take advantage, win the war, and then end up being, they won the Civil War. So that example is a perfect example of prudence. And you would think, wow, that sounds more like fortitude, like courage, right? Prudence, it's really that prudence? And the truth is, yes, it is prudence because virtues complement, right? So you can be prudent, but also have a lot of fortitude. And the truth is that in that scenario, prudence was the key virtue, because the colonel at that moment, before acting, what did he do? He thought. That's what you were saying, right? But he not only thought about it, he thought about it, but ultimately he acted. So he has fortitude as well, right? But he acted. And prudence is not only about thinking well, planning, it's about acting, right? And that's really important. So when you talk about prudence, we should not only think about me sitting on a chair making a plan. We should think as well about acting afterwards, right? There's another example. I'm just going to go really quickly about it. But in the same situation during the war, Lincoln, he got different generals, right? And there was one called General George McClellan, right? You don't know about this guy because of what happened. So this guy was like super smart. He was so smart, right? At the age of 15, he already was going to high school. They waived him because he was like super smart. And everyone loved him. You know the cool guy in the group, right? That guy everyone wants to follow, That guy, he was that guy, Super cool guy, good jokes, even like a good friend, and super smart. Like, you want to have that as a general, right? What happened? He was really smart and he planned and he has the best strategy of the military, but he had no action. He would end up in every battle retreating. He had a great plan, but when it came to execution, he was just such a coward. He would retreat all the time. And if you think about it, that's big imprudence. Because even though you can plan a lot of things, right? If you don't act, why you even plan? Like, what's the point? Just don't waste your time. So ultimately, Lincoln, he just fired him because he wanted to use the battalion and he was a pawn, so he fired him. And that's the end of this guy who barely no one knows about it. And you have, it's a coin, right? You have two sides. You have the colonel, who was like really brave, but very prudent. And that's why they won. Versus you have the general who was really imprudent, right? And even though he planned really well, he had no idea how to execute anything. And I don't know, have you watched this movie, Endgame, The Avengers? Yeah? You like it? It's good, right? So I really like that the last movie, because there's no hope. Thanos got just destroyed everything, right? But then, the Hulk, right? The doctor, so he finds some hope. He finds a plan, right? He says, well, there's hope. We can do something about it. Let's plan together. And they plan for a long time, right? All the Avengers, they gather. They start, preparing this plan. And then, why they won? They had a great plan. But they won because they act. So even though you might see the movie, it's like, oh yeah, Captain America, like he's super brave and has a lot of fortitude. No, like ultimately they are really prudent. And perhaps one of the biggest superheroes of the movie is Hulk, because he finds a plan, he prepares a plan, but then ultimately they act, and that's why they win. So prudence here is not only about thinking well and acting, it's about also taking risks. Sometimes you just plan and you execute and it just doesn't work. But at least you tried it. You were prudent. Okay? So, what is prudence? If we have to summarize it, it would be right reason, right? Right reason in action. So you have to think well, but you have to act, right? And if you break this down into pieces, you can call it, there's like 3 pieces, right? First one would be deliberation. I think about it. Okay, what's the situation, right? Let's learn about this. Let's plan about this. Then there's judgment. So after you think, you have to judge. Okay, what's the best plan? What's the best outcome, right? And finally, as I said multiple times, there's action. This is the best strategy. Let's do it, guys. Like, if you have a game, right? And there's this great example of action is that you can plan a lot in a game. Before the game, you were playing basketball, right? NBA, they plan a lot beforehand, right? Even though they plan a lot with a coach, the game starts. And when the game starts, there's not much plan to think about anymore. It's about acting, executing the plan. Hey, the strategy is the game, the players, right? Maybe you change the player, but you are there executing what you plan, right? Prudence is about that. Almost all sports are about prudence. Planning really well to execute on the field. So it's very clear about action, right? About what I said, action, like you have to act. But what about right reason? it's important to act, but you can act and be doing just the worst action ever, right? You need to plan well. How do you plan well? So the truth is that planning is not about having a template. It's like, okay, what do I have to do when I have a basketball game? I have these guidelines. Okay, I have to sit down a week before, just play some, I don't know, some tricks with the guys, just do some physical, and then that's it. If you do that, you will win. No, it's not about that. It's about principles. There's some principles behind it. And every situation, you need to have those principles, those fundamental, ideas, right? Those should be there. Same in the church, it happens, right? Like if you wanna, let's say that you have a temptation, right? You can have 100 plans. They will probably won't work. Every situation is different. You need to have the good principles there. You need to know them. And that's the most important thing, principles. But when the principles are there, ultimately, for right reason, would be advice, support. And to me, that's one of the things I struggle the most, especially, I would say, now getting more towards the field of spirituality, right? When you have sins, I won't say all the time temptation, sometimes there's other sins, right? But they say, if you are in a community, it always helps. It's going to be easier. And I always thought like, well, if I do it myself, it's going to be enough. Yeah, you can try it. Doesn't mean that you can't, but it's just going to be really hard. Why doing it so hard? If you can have a community, right, supporting you. Same happens in sports. Let's go back to example in sports, right? I have here a great example I'm not going to use because it's about football and I have no idea about football. So I could talk about soccer, but Football Club Barcelona, for example, right? The thing is that those guys, they plan for weeks, right? So they plan for weeks. So when we have Barca against Real Madrid, right? The coaches are weeks watching games, right? With the football players. Not only on the field training, they watch the games. They see the strategies of each player. They see how to counterattack. They plan everything. Then they train and they ultimately, go into action. But the game is just like 90 minutes, guys. There's weeks of planning first. And the thing is that in most of the cases, the planning is so good. They have even like people up there, bird's eye during the game, on the radio, giving them instructions. Like that's the level of planning, because you want to have a good plan, you want to have a good strategy to ultimately execute it, right? So that's how it's important, when it comes to right reason, right, to planning, to judgment, to deliberation, right? It's important to take it that seriously. But ultimately, remember, take action. Because if you don't take action, right reason doesn't have anything to do with it. So just to kind of wrap up here, I would say, if you know that it's right reason to action, I have to think well to act, right? What are some practical ways to implement this? Because yes, you're not a warrior, I'm not a colonel, I know, I'm not gonna go in a war, so all these examples, they're great for a talk, but what can you implement here? So for Prudence, maybe it's better when it comes to practical implementation, guys, it's better to break it down into the two most important pieces, right? Right reason, as I said, right, the planning, and then action. What can we do to have good reason, but also to have good action, right? Let's just start with reason, right reason, right? What can we do to plan well, to have the right strategy, right? To win. When I execute, have the best, strategy. So maybe those examples are a little, away from you still, but I think you kind of start getting them, maybe implement them. I would say a good advice would be that perhaps the first area you want to start having good right reason would be relationships, right? All of you have friends, right? And ultimately one day maybe you will have a girlfriend, who knows? You have wives, right? So for those relationships, you really need to have good advice, right? Good advice to know what are the good friends that you have. Maybe also the friends that are not so good, right? You need to seek for advice. Advice to do what? We'll talk about it, right? But you need to seek for advice. And even for, when you're dating, maybe the best advice comes from your parents, guys. Like from your dad. It's like, hey dad, like how you met your mom, right? Or even for parents that are already married. I'm married, I go to circles in Opus Dei. But right now we have one thing called family enrichment. I don't know if you've heard about it. and there's a bunch of parents there. Just they have practical cases on how you have your family, and I was shocked of how much advice you need after getting married. And here you have like real experience. So how I can talk about it is you have more experience than me, but you really need advice, and sometimes it's not advice from your father, it's advice from other parents, or from someone who is not even your parent, like a priest. Like you need advice. So it's important to seek for advice in relationships, friends, wife, girlfriend. Another thing, very important, college, right? High school. Like when I have to select high school, when I have to select college, right? You don't just want to go and take the list. Okay, this is the college I want to pick. No, like you want to think about it, right? You have to seek for advice. But in this case, maybe your parents are good, but also maybe your teacher, a teacher that you really, think is a good teacher, a mentor. Sometimes a mentor is not even a teacher, it's a father. It's maybe, that father from my friend who's a great guy, person I admire a lot, or the priest, right? They can help you, as I said, in relationships, but also on selecting the college or the high school. Like this is very important, right? It's a decision, it's a lifetime decision as well. But also there's like lower level situations where you can seek advice, right? When you pick a book or a movie, yes guys, like when you pick things like that, those have an impact. Maybe it's indirect, you don't realize about it, but whatever they show, they will stick here. So for example, I struggle reading, okay? I'm gonna use this example. I am terrible, right? So my spiritual director told me, okay, this is what you're gonna do for Lent. You read a book. I was like, oh man, this is the hardest thing ever, No, really, like I just have such a hard time. So I started reading a book. And then what book I read, Obviously the priest, knows really good books. But I start thinking like, okay, so if I need to know about good books, who can give me advice? So I have friends who, I'm really fortunate because they read a lot. So, situations come up and they just tell me, oh, this great book, 12 Rules of Life. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna pick that book, right? There's this other book, No Jesus. Okay, pick it up. And then I buy those books. I'm not gonna read them, but I have them on the shelf. So my shelf that I had no books right now I have good books. So every time I have to select a book, it's like, okay, I'm gonna pick this book because a friend of mine told me it's a good book. So at least I know it's a good book, If I have to read, let's read something good, right? So I struggle in action when it comes to reading, but at least I have the right reason. I have good friends, coaches, teachers that told me, okay, this is a good book, right? So when you select a movie or a book, sometimes it's worth asking first. And I gave you examples of college, but one day it's gonna be an internship, right? Or it's gonna be something different, skills, even like a sport, right? Sometimes you are terrible at, baseball. Seek advice. Maybe they tell you you're great at basketball. There's a good group of friends. Maybe try there. So any place is a good situation where you can seek for advice. So right reason covered, guys. Let's think right now about action. Action is once we have the good plan, let's execute it. Because I would say I would use myself also as an example here. I'm a really good planner. I don't need help there. Example of the books, right? I'm terrible at starting reading a book. But also in other things as well. For example, right now I bought a new car, right? So I'm super happy with my car. It took me like 8 months to buy the car. Terrible. I checked all cars, went to all dealerships, but then I had the money. I was like, I'm so scared about messing it up. And prudence is not about fear, right? Fear is about being a coward. Sometimes you need to execute. I need the car. I have a family. My family is gonna come. I need it. So it's about planning, but also executing. So action is about that. So how you can implement that, guys? So leaving the parents aside for a moment. You have to select the new high school, right? What can I do? Sometimes it's good to have a goal sheet, right? You have it with your dad. You have it with your mentor, with your teacher. Every month you review about your prudence. You review about your plans you have to do. Okay, I have to prepare for the college, right? For the high school. Maybe I have to get better grades. Maybe I have to do some volunteering, right? Because that's gonna help for my application, right? Okay, so you review with your dad, and maybe your dad just recommends you to talk to the father, right? And maybe they will help you find what's the best for you. So having this monthly goal sheet, right, can help you. Sometimes a goal sheet is good, but sometimes it's good a to-do list. I don't know if you do to-do lists. I was not doing them at your age. I started them doing those later on, but it helped me a lot to do it. Super useful, right? Probably your parents, they have that with your moms, right? Like they actually have a list of saying, okay, this week I have to do all this stuff. If you don't know it, you will miss it, right? So it's important to have that to prioritize. Focus on the most important thing first, right? Okay, I have a game, basketball game. I have to study. I have, I don't know, this birthday party, right? What's the most important thing? You have the to-do list, but what's the most important thing? Maybe you have to start studying first and then playing the game, right? Like preparing for the game and ultimately going to a party. You can do all things, but if you don't know them, if you don't have them on a list, sometimes you just forget about them. And then that's for the parents right now. You probably do that, but there's this advice. It doesn't come from me. It comes from the family enrichment. I really liked it. I don't know if you have a calendar with your wives, right, or even with your family. I have one with my wife, and it works really well. Google Calendar. We put all the events. That improves communication a lot. It will save you from a lot of trouble, right? So I advise you that. But also there was one I didn't know. I have this calendar in my phone, but when you have kids, guys, like you might not have a Google Calendar yet, right? So having a calendar on your fridge is even better. And once a week, you just sit down and say, hey guys, okay, let's check this week. Is everything here, right? Your game, maybe the game you're playing on Saturday. Maybe, I don't know, you all, as a family, you want to watch a good movie, right? Let's put the movie, right? So having that calendar helps to not miss anything important, even like the game of your son. That's important. Like you don't want to miss that one. And then finally, I would say, think about the consequences, right? We said, okay, let's go pick the good movie, right? But ultimately, when you are acting, right, think about the consequences of deviating of what you plan, right? Like, okay, so if I said I'm gonna go and play the game, my basketball game with my friends, maybe there's that not so good friend that proposes to do not so good stuff at the end of the game. So when you are on the field, think about that, okay? It's not about planning always. It's about when you're in action, right? Sticking to a plan, but also like have good reason there. And then just before I finish, I would like to say that sometimes it's good to have good mentors and coaches and teachers, but sometimes it's good to be that mentor for someone else. Maybe you have a good friend that is having a hard time. Maybe he doesn't have a good friend. Maybe he's on the wrong environment, and you can be that good friend helping them. You don't have to do anything hard. Just be there, listen to them, giving advice. Ultimately, they will have to take action, right? Because it's their prudence. You cannot take action for someone else. That's not prudence, right? They have to do it. But sometimes you can influence them to have the right reason. So I invite you to do that. Like practice it, and when you're good at it, help others, right? I think that's important. It will actually even help you be better at the prudence. So, and that's it. I don't know. If you have any questions, now's the time, guys. Yeah. Big speech. Oh man, I hope it's not only a speech.
A very good talk.
Thank you. You have to have good character, right? That's important. And listen to your parents. They are the first mentors.
I share your struggle with the reading.
You share the struggle?
Yes, I share the same.
Man, it's just so
I
hard.
have a lot of books.
A lot of books. Not read. Anyone?
Still working on it.
So that's what my spiritual director told me. Is like, just pick 10 minutes a day. You'll be surprised. And man, it's hard to say, but yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
It's like after 3 months, it's like, wow, I almost finished the book. Yeah.
How about you guys? I think picking a mentor, that advice at the end, that's especially for you two. It's part of counsel. Like, take a couple of your trainers and helpers, and then ask them about how their altar serving is going.
You're the leads, right? Of the altar, boys.
These two are the leaders, yeah.
Then you guys, whatever you do, they will follow you. Like literally for good and bad, right? So it's good to be a good mentor, even a friend. You know?
I think it applies to like the prudence where you're planning and thinking and then before action. It applies to like the discernment that you guys develop and to what you guys want to do.
Good. Got ready for the game right now to play? That's good.
Want to play football or basketball or soccer?
I know brother Bruce wants to play.
Whatever. I didn't even know we were going this way. So I was like, I have it in my truck.